Hello, everyone. Good evening. I'm Tracy Lester. I'm the Executive Director of the Center for Fiction, and we are delighted to have you here with us tonight. I'd like to extend a warm welcome to our friends who are also watching virtually. Tonight is a special night. We're here to celebrate the Emerging Writers Fellowship Program, a program near and dear to the heart of the Center for Fiction. Tonight, we will hear from wonderful current fellows, and we will welcome our new class of incoming fellows, who some of us are meeting for the first time tonight. Tonight, we will also speak about the wonderful Susan Campbell. I want to take a moment to welcome our board of directors, some of whom are here tonight with us, and also our generous supporters of our Emerging Writers Fellowship Program. The Center for Fiction is the only nonprofit literary organization in the United States solely dedicated to celebrating fiction and uplifting storytelling in all its forms. We work every day to connect readers and writers. This year, we celebrate our 200th anniversary. As an important piece of New York City history, here at the Center for Fiction, we continue to build our circulating library, begun before the emergence of the public library system. You can also visit our amazing bookstore, which you walk through to get to this auditorium, which is open daily. And you can visit our members lounge and our soon to reopen cafe. In addition, we host both in-person and virtual book groups on classic and contemporary fiction, as well as writing workshops. And we provide free books, events, and workshops to New York City students from kindergarten through 12th grade. Even more, we are known for our literary events and distinguished list of guest authors and speakers. And we recognize the best in the world of fiction through our annual awards, including the First Novel Prize and the Medal for Editorial Excellence. Because of all of this, we are a community at the Center for Fiction, and we have much to be thankful for, including you who are here with us tonight. So tonight we are here to celebrate the Emerging Writers Fellowship Program. And I'd like to invite to the stage the chair of our board of directors, Errol McDonald, who will speak a bit more about tonight's program and about the Emerging Writers Fellowship Program.
Good evening. The Emerging Writers Fellowship Program is celebrating its 10th anniversary this year. It incarnates, it bodies forth the mission of the center by assisting the pursuit of a literary career by a rich diversity of young, talented writers, 9 each year. The center is very proud of their successes. Many have gone on to publish first novels developed or completed during their fellowship year. Others have gone on to greater glories. Okay. It is because we treasure this program that I, on behalf of the board, extend profound gratitude to my visionary colleague, Maria Campbell, who, together with literary agent extraordinaire, Kathy Robbins, has found a way to celebrate a legendary publisher, extraordinary for the keenness of her discernment, the passion of her commitment to authors, and her general good cheer around everybody. They've also found a way to lighten the load, the burden shouldered by emerging writers, cultural warriors to be, guardians of the word. They, she, he, Maria Campbell.
Thank you, Errol. I don't know whether I can live up to all of that. I'm delighted to be here in person to celebrate the 10th anniversary of the newly named Center for Fiction Susan Campbell Fellowships for Emerging Writers, and to celebrate this year's 9 fellows who you will be hearing from shortly. First and foremost, I want to raise a real glass to all the friends of Susan's the world over who have so generously contributed to make this award possible. To Susan. At the top of that list is Kathy Robbins, Susan's honorary sister and my treasured partner in creating this award in her memory. Approximately 2 years ago, we lost Susan. There was an immediate outpouring from friends and colleagues. What struck me the most were the words of the authors who spoke at the memorial in the New York Times auditorium. Kathy and I started talking about the best way to honor Susan. Having dedicated her life to nurturing writers, what better way to celebrate her than naming an emerging writers program after her? It's taken 2 years, but we got there. I would like to thank Gina Centrello, who kicked off our fundraising campaign with a wonderful donation from Random House, Madeline McIntosh, and everyone in the PRH group who have contributed so generously. The Barney Karpfinger Agency was another crucial supporter who made a meaningful early donation. Special thanks to Bob Cohn, Susan's husband, who is with us tonight, and Stuart Applebaum, Susan's honorary brother. Kathy and I are especially grateful to Tracy Lester, who took up our idea in April when she became the executive director of the center, and Linda Morgan, the Center for Fiction Development Director, who both gave us invaluable support during our 2-year journey. Now I'm honored to introduce Elizabeth Strout, one of our finest writers, who has kindly carved out precious time to make this video on the eve of the publication of O. William, her 9th novel. After the video, Andy Ward, the publisher of Random House and Susan's trusted deputy for many years and now her successor, will speak to us about Susan. Thank you.
Emerging, no matter where they are in their career, we continue to. Writers are always emerging, no matter where they are in their career, we continue to emerge. And it is a sorrowful pleasure to speak on behalf of the Susan Campbell Award for Emerging Writers. The truth is, when I first met Susan, it didn't go so well. She had been assigned to me, or did she assign herself? I don't know, but she was about to be my new editor. And she showed up one day in my apartment and she said, knowing that I was from Maine originally, she said, "You know, I love Maine. I went to camp there when I was a kid." She had no way of knowing these were words that I hated to hear from New Yorkers. I had grown up on a dirt road in Maine, and I had seen the girls from New York across the bay as they jumped into the ocean wearing white swimsuits. Privately, I had always been jealous of them. So I just said, "Well, that's nice." And I rolled my eyes to myself. So it's funny now to think how I had no idea that day. I had no idea at all how important Susan Campbell would become to me. In my professional life, she would become a rudder, and in my personal life, she was a light. So how did my conversion take place? It was quite simply her quiet, steadfast kindness to me. Over the next year or two, she took me to dinner frequently, and she was calm and always, always kind to me. I began to realize that not only did I like her, I loved her, and I understood that she loved me. As my books came out, she steered me with her rudder so smoothly through those publications. Always she stayed calm. A bad review, she didn't seem to care. A spot on the list, she was happy. She was my person. But what I really want to say is how my relationship with Susan over these years had a tone for me that was different. It's that I trusted her in a way that I have never trusted many people. And that trust in her allowed me to write the books I felt that I wanted to write because she felt that I should and could write them. I've thought about this so much in the last 2 years, and I think there was an innocence inside Susan because she would not otherwise have been able to recognize in me my own innocence. And she did, that part of me that still came from that dirt road in Maine. She protected me fiercely. Any writer in the world should be lucky enough to have a Susan Campbell in their lives. She was one of a kind, though. She was.
Hi. Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for being here tonight to celebrate this wonderful group of emerging writers, as well as the woman for whom this fellowship is now named, Susan Campbell. Before I talk about Susan, I wanted to take a moment to thank Penguin Random House and the Carpfinger Agency for their incredible generosity and for everything they've done over the past 2 years to make this night a reality. Susan and Barney Carpfinger went way back as friends and colleagues, and I know she played an important role in his career as he did in hers. So thank you, Barney, and thank you, Penguin Random House. I had the privilege of working one office over from Susan for more than a decade. And in those years, it's no exaggeration to say that I learned what a book editor does and what a book editor is. For those of you who didn't know Susan, or who never had the chance to work with her, I'd love to take a moment to tell you about what made her great. Susan had an almost superhuman ability to read a novel in a single afternoon at her desk, size up its shortcomings, and then looking up and rubbing her eyes, immediately start dispensing ideas on how to solve those problems, from thorny plot issues to the mysterious and subtle questions of character. Her genius with this stuff, with character and motivation, was partly a function of just being a naturally gifted, intuitive editor. But it was also a function of her bottomless stores of empathy and her ability not only to see people, but to appreciate them, flaws and all. The other thing that made Susan great is harder to define or emulate, and yet it's maybe the most important of all. Susan had an ability to make every writer, every person really, who walked out of her office or who hung up the phone after talking with her, feel like they mattered, that their work mattered, and that she was with them to the end. Together, they were going to pull this thing off, as crazy as it was. This act of turning a bunch of words into a story that was not only going to work, but was going to last. There are a million reasons why Susan Campbell is irreplaceable, but to me, this transference of belief was the most magical and the thing we, writers, editors, people, can all aspire to. She would smile, shine that light on you, and make you believe in yourself. Tonight, we celebrate a group of 9 emerging writers. The inaugural class of the Center for Fiction Susan Campbell Emerging Writer Fellowship, all of whom receive a generous grant to support their work and to bring this whole thing full circle, a year of mentorship with a distinguished editor. I can think of no better way to honor Susan's memory than to stress the importance of mentorship and to try to recreate the love of authors that Susan demonstrated every day of her professional life. Susan Campbell believed in fiction. She believed in debut fiction. She believed in nurturing talent. She put her whole heart into the book she worked on and helped make stars of many writers, though she would never, ever have said it that way. Susan's the perfect namesake for this fellowship, and I love the idea of her presence 2 years after her death, hovering over this whole enterprise. Congratulations to all the fellows here tonight. I wish you had known Susan, but I can assure you, she would have believed in you. Thank you so much.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Andy, for that wonderful tribute. Thank you, Maria, Arrow, and Tracy for your previous remarks. My name is Terry Q. I'm the Writing Programs Manager here at the Center, where every year I have the great pleasure of building relationships and supporting the work of 9 immensely talented writers of fiction. The Center for Fiction Susan Campbell Emerging Writers Fellowship Program was created to further the Center's mission of encouraging people to read and value fiction, and to support its creation and enjoyment. It was created to give writers at a critical point in their careers what they need most, among other things, financial support, mentorship, exposure, and community, all of which is reflected here tonight. That we are standing here to mark the 10th anniversary of this program and its renaming in honor of the remarkable Susan Campbell, following a successful fundraising campaign, speaks to the program's successful model and is no doubt a sign of bigger and better things to come. The future of the fellowship program is very bright. To date, the fellowship program has provided close to $500,000 in financial support to 98 New York City-based writers. By the end of next year, alums of the program will have published 32 novels, more than 2/3 of which were started here. 5 of those 25 books will be published between December of this year and next fall. And I'm excited to have played a small, very, very small part in the process for 4 of those writers. Our alumni have been the recipient of prestigious awards, such as the Whiting Award. They've been named National Book Foundation's 5 Under 35 honorees and won the Sunday Times Short Story Award. Most recently, they were awarded the 2020 PEN Hemingway Award for debut novel, and in 2021, the Pulitzer Prize for essay. Yes, they do write nonfiction, which went to Mitch Jackson, who 10 years ago was one of the first 8 writers in the inaugural class of Center for Fiction Fellows. The success of our alums makes this among the most coveted writing fellowships in the country. And the selection process is not a simple one. I'm glad it's a task that does not fall under my responsibilities. It's a difficult task that falls in the hands of carefully selected judges. And this year, we couldn't have been more thrilled than to have 3 of our former fellows on the panel, 2 of whom are here with us tonight. Nicola de Roberto Thay, author of the Vietcha Project. Where's Nicola? And Siddiq Fofana, author of the forthcoming Our Tenants Downstairs. And Aaron Summers, author of Stay Up with Hugo Best, who unfortunately couldn't be here with us tonight. This year, we received over 530 applications, and it is now my pleasure to introduce you to the 9 recipients of the inaugural Center for Fiction Susan Campbell Emerging Writer Fellowships. Fellows, as I read your name, please make your way up on stage, and audience, please keep your applause for the end. Josh Borja is an educator and writer based in New York City and has taught with CUNY Brooklyn College, the New York City College of Technology, NYU Shanghai, NYU Washington Square, Legal Outreach, and the Johns Hopkins Summer Program. Gina Chung is a Korean-American writer from New Jersey, currently living in Brooklyn, New York, whose work has appeared or is forthcoming in the Kenyon Review, Catapult, Golf Course, and elsewhere. She is currently working on a novel about climate change, sea creatures, and loss. Caleb Gale, who couldn't be here with us tonight, writes about the impact of history on race and identity. Gale's writing has been featured in the New York Times Magazine, The Atlantic, the Los Angeles Review of Books, and elsewhere. Sonny George is a Bronx-born writer and former journalist. She earned her MFA in fiction from Goddard College and her BA in journalism from Syracuse University. Her work has been published in the literary magazine Stone Canoe, Blackbird, and Jabberwock Review. Jared Jackson was born in Hartford, Connecticut. He received an MFA in fiction from Columbia University, and his work has received support from the Tin House Winter Workshop and has appeared in the New York Times Book Review, the Yale Review, Guernica, and elsewhere. Jen Liu is a Kundiman Fellow and a 2018-19 Margins Fellow at the Asian American Writers Workshop. Her work has been featured in Joyland, The Margins, Bomb Magazine, and Sepia Journal, and she is currently at work on a collection of short stories. Mary Wang is a writer and editor based in New York. She leads Miscellaneous Files on Guernica, a series of virtual studio visits in which writers use digital artifacts to talk about their practice, and her work has appeared in Bomb, The Guardian, Long Reads, Vogue, and elsewhere. Katie Yee is a writer from Brooklyn and the Bookmarks Associate Editor at LitHub. She holds a BA from Bennington College and has been awarded a Kundiman Mentorship Lab Fellowship. Her work has appeared in the Los Angeles Review of Books, Epiphany, No Tokens, and elsewhere. Na Zhang is a New York-based writer, literary translator, and cultural podcaster. She has written for The Margins, LitHub, the Los Angeles Review of Books, The Millions, Words Without Borders, and Asymptote. She is the co-founder of Accent, a platform dedicated to connecting and supporting Asian diasporic writers. She has recently completed her first novel, which examines a fierce mother-daughter relationship through storytelling. Please give a warm round of applause for the 2021 Center for Fiction Emerging Writer Fellows. And now I'd like to introduce you to our current fellows, our 2020 fellows. Each fellowship cohort is unique and special in its own way. And I want to commend the way that you guys have come together and showed up for yourselves and each other, despite the difficult circumstances of the last year and a half. I really commend you, and it's been a pleasure to work with you guys. It's been a real treat the last 12 months, and I'm your number one fan, and I can't wait to see what you have in store in the years to come. But for now, let us enjoy the wonderful excerpts you've come prepared to share with us tonight. Please join me in celebrating the work of our 2020 fellows. And with that said, our first reader for the night, Rachel Wolf.
Thank you, Terry, for everything. Welcome to the new fellows, and thank you all for being here. This has been just the most incredible opportunity, so generous and so thoughtful, and we're just very grateful. I'm Rachel Wolf. I'm going to be reading from my novel. It's called The Offspring, and this is the start of chapter 2. Mara wished she had someone to whom she could explain how hollow, literally hollow, she'd felt before and how full she felt now, standing as close as she could reasonably get to a painting that shouldn't exist. It hung on the gallery's eastern wall, uncrowded, and to Mara at least, it was beckoning, aglow. Its surface was not a canvas, but a goat's hide, stretched taut in an open wooden frame. its edges still raw and suggestive of the animal to which it once adhered. The ropes that pulled and bound it into place looked like somebody's fetish. The black ink the artist used to so precisely render the oversized face that stared back at her sat matte atop the skin in a way Mara had only seen in a Torah scroll before. This made sense. The ink and the hide were those tools exactly. The artist, Yitzhak Rabinowitz, had trained to be a religious scribe in the Hasidic community into which he was born and from which he and his wife Edel had fled. The exhibition was called The Offspring, which on any other day Mara might have associated first with the 1990s era band, but today she was hollow and thought of family, and the press release confirmed that this title was indeed literal, biblical, derived from the Aramaic zerah, which meant offspring or progeny or seed. It was a series of what the artist was calling speculative portraits, each featuring an adult version of a girl who disappeared between 1936 and 1938 from a Jewish girls' school in Berlin, a building that now housed art galleries and an upscale restaurant and bar. He based the paintings on scant archival photographs of the school's activities. He selected 18 girls because 18 stood for Chai, for life, then imagined what could have been had each survived. From there, he conjured his depictions. Conjured, that's what the press release said. His methods meant that most of the portraits depict older women, their faces etched with age. Some appear around 60 or 70, others 80 or 90, but not the portrait before her, titled number 8 and dated 2019. The woman in portrait number 8 is much younger. She is 30, maybe 35, and she is Dina, Mara's sister, who died in Chicago in February 2001 when she was 16 and Mara was 15, and Yitzhak Rabinowitz was some 800 miles and just as many worlds away. Dina's mouth is open as if about to speak, her teeth slightly crowded on the bottom from never wearing her retainer, her whole face animated with whatever she's about to say. Her hair is bobbed with short blunt bangs, her chin is long and pointed, her nose is long and pointed. Her heart-shaped cheeks have taken on a bit more definition with age. The surface of the hide is the exact shade of olive beige that Dina's skin had been, and even though Yitzhak hadn't used any colored inks, the absence of tone and shade in Dina's irises communicated their nearly translucent blue. Mara wondered about doppelgangers before she wondered about ghosts. Like, was it common to see the loved one in the face of another, in the work of another? Probably, but how common, and with what level of accuracy? The accuracy was getting to her. She'd seen other girls and women who'd looked like Dina, but the precision of what sat on the hide before her was difficult to explain. And it was in that one-to-one likeness that Mara veered briefly toward the absurd. Like, what if 18 years on, it came to light that Dina hadn't actually died? It could be a long game or a long con or whatever, a cruel joke or some kind of extreme comeuppance for any number of sisterly transgressions, the worst of which Mara worked actively to suppress from memory each and every day. Like, ha, I got you. We're even now, okay? And of course she'd be in Berlin. All the interesting artists were. And Mara would be here, abandoned yet again, looking longingly at her sister, wondering how it could be that their genetic makeup had been more or less the same. Yet while this possible evidence of life teased and lingered, other images lingered too, like Dina's body in the box in the ground, everyone crying, everyone in black, their father, then their mother, then Mara, scooping up rock and earth from the mound next to the grave, how she'd shuddered at the sound of it falling from the shovel onto the casket, a sensation that returned whenever it hailed. So no, it wasn't Dina, just someone who looked like Dina, but exactly like Dina, someone with her exact features and exact hairstyle, skin tone, teeth, that mix of composure and gawky excitement when she spoke, her eyes focused, her mouth wide with a torrent of words that only went together when she said them. Mara could hear her talking about an artwork she was excited to make or something outrageous she'd read or saw or did. Dina could see a tree and summon a love story, a building and summon a body. Birds were machines, computers were parents, libraries were brains, flowers were wishes, dancing was learning, art was God. How many 30-something women were there in Berlin? Plenty. How many with dark hair and bangs, green-white skin, giant blue eyes, and crooked bottom teeth? Probably a lot. Never mind the fact that the women in Yitzhak's paintings were all fantasies, all dead. A conjuring, says the artist, a fiction, a thought experiment, a sharply executed game of what if. So that settled it. But the nose, the chin, the lips, the bangs, but the box, the grave, the rocks ricocheting off of the lid. But Mara stayed all day, marveling at the exactitude, forgetting about her aches and the bleeding and the cloud she'd seen on the ultrasound tech screen and the silence that meant it was gone. At home that night, she emailed everyone she knew who worked at the gallery, trying and failing to get in touch with the artist who appeared to be elusive by design. She learned from Andrea, a gallery director, that he rarely talked to journalists, and when he did, only in person, which now meant in Berlin, which meant money, and time away, which also meant money, even less of it if she couldn't manage to turn this into work. She swiped through the photos of Dina she'd taken on her phone. She wrote back to Andrea, whatever it takes. And because she was still dodging her roommate's pity invites to do things and her mother's texts and calls and the way her body still looked a little different in the mirror, Mara started going to the gallery daily to see Dina. She'd stand before the painting for as long as she could in silent communion with her sister, talking to her from within like she used to talk to God. Thank you. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you to the Center for Fiction for putting this on, and a huge thanks to Terry for being so wonderful this past year, and a huge congratulations to the new fellows. This fellowship has been truly a light during what was a horrible, horrible year. My name is Sasha Von Olderzhausen, and I will be reading an excerpt from my novel, which is about a young journalist who moves to a small Texas town. The next time I hear from Pancho, he's invited me over for tamales. I'm working, I write him, but minutes later, I decide to go for a mid-afternoon jog and tell him that I can jog to his house if he likes. Orale, he writes back. He lives with his parents in a tan, double-wide trailer, nondescript, near the edge of town, on a dirt road with trailers that look identical to his. Look for my truck parked outside, he tells me, and I have to ask him to remind me what kind of truck he has. He finds this funny. On my jog, I get chased by a pack of stray chihuahuas who nip at my ankles, so I run harder, outpacing their little legs, and arrive at Pancho's house sweating and flushed. He offers me a beer. I'm working, I say, but take the bottle anyway, evacuating its contents from thirst, and almost immediately feel its buzz creep into the edges of my vision. There are pots on his stove. He's stirring something. I thought we were having tamales, I say. We are, he says. These are the beans. Smells good, I say. My mom made it, he says, chuckling. I'm just the reheater. I wander around the trailer, peering at photos hanging on the walls. Is this you, I say, pointing to a framed photo of a young boy in a blue football uniform, crouching down on one knee, his helmet in his hand. Yeah, he says, looking up from the stove. The school used to have a football team, but they got rid of it. Why'd they do that? They didn't have money, he says, stirring the pot again. He looks up at me then. They used to say I was pretty good. Too bad. I guess you missed your chance at being a football star, I say with just a trace of sarcasm. He shrugs. I'm worried I offended him. These your parents, I say, gesturing toward a family portrait. He nods. Where are they now? Mexico, he says. There's a dining table pushed against the far wall with 4 plastic fold-out chairs arranged around it. He serves us on styrofoam plates, ladling a spoonful of soupy pinto beans into each. How many do you want, he asks me, motioning to a tower of tamales in their husks. Just one, I say. Really? I can't stay long, I remind him. He plates a single tamale next to my pool of beans and then places a couple on his own plate, uncapping another beer, offering it to me first. I shake my head no, and he takes a swig. We sit down. What are you writing about, he says. I realize I haven't been working on anything specific at all, that I spent most of the morning idling on my computer, so I make something up. Oh, just a city council meeting, I say, peeling away the corn husk to reveal the pale, almost glossy finish of the tamale and the smell of stewed pork. My mouth pools with saliva.
I'm suddenly aware of how hungry I am. Does anyone actually go to those? I shake my head, swallowing. Most of the time, it's just me and the mayor, I say, and he laughs. I dig my fork into the tamale and scoop the silky beans onto the edge of my bite. The tamale is tender and warm, the meat red with chili. Oh, wow, I say, closing my eyes and swallowing. Pancho is smiling at me, chewing too and nodding. We eat in silence. I scrape the last remnants from my plate and wipe my mouth with a piece of paper towel he handed me. Thank you, I say, feeling awkward within the intimacy of this space, of hearing each other chew. My body suddenly feels weighted, cumbersome. I hunch over in my seat, grabbing hold of my shoelaces, twisting them between my fingertips. Your mom is a really good cook, I offer the silence. Pancho nods. He's finishing his third. Well, I should get going, I announce suddenly, surprising even myself, and he looks up. You just got here, he says, smiling vaguely. I nod and pick up my phone from the table like I'm checking the time. Yeah, I've got to get back to work, I say. Sorry. Okay, he says. He walks me to the door and I thank him again, then bolt out jogging, the beer and tamale and beans churning in my stomach. Once I'm comfortably out of sight, I slow my pace to an amble. Up ahead, I spot the pack of chihuahuas again, half a dozen of them wandering aimlessly, pushing their noses into the dust or squinting at the sky. I turn down another road before they notice me. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you to the Center for Fiction. And congratulations to the new fellows. You're going to have a blast. This is wonderful. It's been wonderful. My name is Camila Santos. I'm going to read an excerpt from my short story, A Better Son. The main character, Pedro, works as a barback at a cocktail lounge. And before his shift is about to start, he finds out that his mother is in the hospital undergoing surgery back in Brazil. Among the colorful cardboard boxes piled high against the metal wall, all is quiet. If Pedro turned off the light, he'd be completely sealed off from the madness upstairs and Rogério's pitying gaze, but most importantly, from his longing for escape. He imagines dropping a crate of liquor right in front of the bar, the sound of glass shattering as it hits the floor, the smell of vodka and beer overpowering French perfume and sweat. He relishes the stunned look on John's face as he unties his apron and walks out the door. He'd cross the public gardens, past the sleeping geese and the empty wooden benches, and go straight to the travel agency at the corner of Newbury and Gloucester Streets. He forces himself to keep going with this daydream, but his mind keeps turning to another image, that of his mother, her frail body in one of those thin hospital gowns under the fluorescent lighting of an operating room. He leans against the walk-in freezer, concentrating on the shock of the cold metal wall against the back of his t-shirt. Even though he no longer believes in God, he tries to remember the prayers she has taught him. To repeat those words is like clutching an amulet, one his mother is certainly gripping as well. And so are his uncle and cousins, the neighbors, his parents' friends. His mother's hospital room is probably filled with flowers, the rosaries and prayer cards blessed in the hospital's chapel. Maybe someone will remember to bring some of her favorite crossword puzzles. Visitors will huddle around his father with hushed voices, which grow louder with the certainty that the patient is awake. Hands will prop her pillow, stroke her hair, rinse the aluminum chamber pot. Her eyes will stay on the television, too tired to talk, too polite to ask everyone to leave. No one will notice the faint smell of urine, sweat, and disinfectant. No one will utter the word tumor or what is to come, chemotherapia. All will feel blessed, hopeful, victorious. Modern medicine once again sweeping death under the rug. A temporary triumph. Everyone in that hospital room, Pedro thinks, except for me. When he realizes he's shivering, he quickly gets to his feet and stacks boxes of Heineken, Stella, and Corona on top of each other. Tomorrow, he thinks, I'll send over more money. He will look into hiring a private nurse for when his mother is released from the hospital. That solution comforts him. Yes, as long as I keep working my ass off, she can get the best care, the best doctors, the best everything. He pushes the fridge door open, runs up the stairs, his arms straining with the weight of the boxes, his mind momentarily distracted, the physical exertion cutting the invisible thread that tugs him back home. Coming through, move, move, he yells at the drunks, jamming the corner of the box against their backs, forcing them out of his way. The faster he can stock the bar with liquor, the more drinks John can make. More drinks equal more tips. So he keeps pushing people out of his way. John rushes over, appeasing customers and opening the removable bar counter for Pedro. I know it's busy, but you gotta take it easy, man, John says, a warning in his voice. And what the hell took you so long? Pedro pretends not to hear the question. As he sets the boxes behind the bar, he feels his cell phone vibrating. Instead of reaching into his pocket, he grabs the soda gun and pours himself a glass of water, John's words making him suddenly aware that he can't push his luck any further with the bartenders. He is the fastest bar back. Whoever works with him makes more tips. But Pedro knows they're only putting up with his slacking tonight because it has never happened before. There are thousands of Pedros in Boston, thousands of men like himself who'd be happy to work 14, 16-hour shifts. Across the room in the second bar, Pedro sees Rogério working just as furiously. Que se foda, fuck this, Pedro repeats under his breath. He puts a hand over his jeans, willing himself not to take the phone from his pocket as it vibrates again and again. His manager yells at him to move out of the way. You going to stand there all night, buddy? Let's make some money, chop, chop. And so Pedro reaches into his pocket. He feels for his phone, hesitating before finally turning it off. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Claire Olsen. I'm a little shorter and I'm here to tell you about the Midwest and death. And I hope you're excited. Thanks for coming out. Oh my God. Okay. Hi. So my manuscript is entitled New Animals, and it centers on queer women and rural spaces and the liminality between them. This is a section from the third chapter that felt narratively isolated enough. Alan Hemming got up in the prenatal dark, put on a wetsuit, and cut into Lake Superior's cold gut with a small sailboat and nothing specific to do besides to save everything. His sister's kids slept in his house, dropped off so that her parents could be alone, suddenly and brightly their own people for a week. Sloan would wake up in the next few hours to find the note saying that Alan was out. This was taped to a covered bowl of oatmeal bedazzled with dried blueberries as some sort of steaming apology for Alan not changing his life at all for her visit. He was bad with kids. She was bad with adult men who thought 16-year-old girls were somewhere at their core not yet people. Their Englishes refused to meld, and they ended up in the kitchen earnestly looking at the other, like an animal that had come in when they left the door ajar. They moved around each other like ceramics, scraping until he broke, waking Sloan up at 5:45 a.m. and telling her she could either come with him or not come with him. This was in her English she dressed. Sloan sat on the bow, not invited to follow Alan under because he owned only one wetsuit. She watched his line waver like an artificial umbilical cord, shivering with the life it held. Alan came back up every 15 minutes or so with a camera, its insides brimming with mediocre pictures of the local shipwrecks, as grainy and soured as crab apples and just as useless. When he was done, whatever that meant to him, he hauled himself up the ladder and dumped fistfuls of zebra mussels onto the deck. Then he handed her a hammer. Go at him, he'd tell her, before beginning to negotiate with the wind to bring them home. Sloan bent to the task, smashing the little shells and their little animals to phlegm and shards. They were invasive. Her destroying them was saving the world, he'd said. She could not tell if he was being serious. She examined his profile in the wind, his stubble and his insomniac's purple cradle below his eyes, the color of lavender buds pressed under phyllo dough. Maybe he was serious. Maybe this was his whole religion, imploding spineless animals the size of toddlers' thumbs. When they were all crushed, she tapped his leg. Sloan watched him dump their tiny deaths back into the water where they fell like heavy snow. Something will eat that, he told her, his palm arguing with a section of rope she did not understand. At dinner, he showed her the scuba hand signals, how to say you were low on air, or to suggest vaguely had something had gone wrong, or to say definitely there was danger nearby. Breathlessness and threats used the same closed fist. Sloan put the signals into her own practice, leaving dinner briefly to go to Alan's bathroom where she rehearsed them all in the mirror. Alan's razor sat on the lip of the sink like a diving board, like a reason to jump. She came back to the table where she made her uncle choke and gasp on his dinner by simply presenting her face. Jesus, you look insane, fuck, he told her. She smiled for all of this. She had shaved both her eyebrows clean off. She was trying to burst up, not a girl, not a favor he was performing for his sister, not a child, but maybe, yes, really an animal that had slipped in when he left the door open. There was something like laughter hung up behind the sounds of Alan's curse words, a dress on a clothesline swelling with ghosts. So he wasn't really angry. Sloan burst in. Let me stay longer. Let me dive with you until they grow back. If I go home like this, my mom won't let me in the house. She pressed a thumb to her now tundra of a brow line. She lied, of course her mother would let her in, but would look at her like Sloan had excised the gender off of her own face and doomed herself to be waiting before she could honestly, wholly be lovable again. Alan was looking at her like a person now. Fuck, he offered into the blue of the evening. He nodded before bending to eating again. This was a sort of quiet, dressed like a yes. Sloan was so happy. Before they went out the next morning, Alan bought a second wetsuit and took an ibuprofen, the last of his coffee. Sloan's eyebrows came back in slowly, as pointillist, conceptual pieces that disappointed both of them and would not have done well at the museum. It got her 2 weeks of following him with headlights through the green-gray seascape in a haze of bliss. The closest she would ever come to this sensation again was at college house parties, which held their own water and their own incomprehensibility just the same. Sloan would meet Lynn at a house party like this, where each sheet of skin in the room was a damp map, where they decide to start not dating, fingers in each other's hair like eels, relieved to finally have someone that they weren't calling their girlfriend, but in a way that felt flooded. That issue, that lexical gap they'd sleep in, was years away from Sloan, who was wringing out her wet hair on the deck. On her last dive, they stayed under longer. The cold got to the middle of her. She felt less and less that her thoughts came in a language now. Instead, they fell right into her hands. She got to thinking that she and Alan were just waves of the water condensing into little bodies in order to look back at itself, to comb out its own stomach with margarine yellow headlights. On the boat, the last time, Alan crushed a handful of zebra mussels below his heel and looked at her. He put a thumb to his brow line. Well, they are tenacious, huh? Still look blighted, but we can send you back now, almost whole, only partially maimed. May your mother forgive me. He smiled and she returned it, bereaved, but the corners of her mouth turned upward nonetheless. His hands were going towards the anchor. Lynn would like her eyebrows. Lynn, who was only a few years in the distance from Sloan on the prow, would like her eyebrows and would hand her a whiskey in a solo cup before they even exchanged names. Sloan took the mouthpiece off her mouth to take in the untanked air. In a few years, they would hold each other in dorm beds on white sheets and not talk. A whole world could be saved on the concave sides of their postures if they crushed all admitting into their closed mouths and said nothing. They let the unlit animals of their tongues stay as dumb and still as stone. They kept English out of it, let their hands simply fall into their hands, first as scraping ceramics, then as heavy snow, finally finding water.
Thank you for coming tonight. Thank you to Thierry and to the center, and of course my fellow fellows. We also have one of our fellow fellows who's not here with us tonight, Raluca. And congratulations to the new fellows as well. It's really an incredible opportunity. My name is Ruth. I'm going to read from an excerpt from a short story of mine, which is called Ace Card. I started to run after the walk to work movement. 11 years had gone by, the COVID-19 pandemic and the revolution that deposed President Museveni were long gone. My sister Patricia had been dead for 10 years and I was still running. Sometimes when the silence and darkness magnified the image of Patricia as she swayed back and forth in the air before she fell into the arms of the revolutionaries. When I heard her voice telling me things I didn't want to hear, I got up and ran until my knees locked. We had just completed our college degrees when the walk to work movement started. As soon as it started, Patricia defected from our family. Overnight, she unveiled her eyes and what she saw were the things that weren't working in Uganda. It didn't matter that our father was a minister and he had forbidden her from participating in subversion activities. In fact, she labeled him as part of the ecosystem that enabled the autocratic regime to prosper. General, do something about this, she shouted during family meals. Why have you chosen to support a president who's murdering Ugandans? She kept asking until he said, I am the Minister of Internal Security and Intelligence. I was a general in the Luwero War. This wasn't necessary. We saw him every day in his military uniforms with the 3 stars, a red beret, a pistol in his pocket, even when he helped us with our homework. This was why we called him General. The day Patricia watched the military descend on unarmed civilians was the day she took to the streets. That night, she refused to have dinner. This food, she pointed at the lasagna, pork ribs from the Italian supermarket, basmati rice, matoke, and fish fillet. The money spent on this one meal could feed hundreds of Ugandans. What would you have us do? Stop eating? Mom asked. Put a stop to it, General. They are vandalizing the country. They are hooligans, Western puppets. Remember this, Patricia, he said. In 1981, when we didn't want the country to go to dogs, we picked up guns and went to the bush. We didn't go around carrying placards and whatnot, talking to journalists. He spoke very fast, as though his words were burning his mouth. Is that what you want us to do? Pick up guns? To win a war, you have to chop off the head of your enemy, not the tails. In the military, you're always looking for your enemy's vulnerabilities. Do you think your enemy is vulnerable on the streets? He pointed his index finger with its long nail at us before he parted his short afro, as though it could ever be out of shape. We shook our heads, even though the question was meant for Patricia. He sat back in his chair and rested his elbows on the table. He had a way of taking up space without trying. Say something, Patricia turned to me. Well, they've set police stations and markets on fire. They've ransacked the banks. It's illegal, I said. You don't have to be his mouthpiece, you know. And just like that, we had made our choices, even though we didn't understand it then. Take it to court, I said. I believed in the law, and that's why I had chosen law school. But my ambitions of using the law to drive change had ended with college. At that time, I was making a lot of money from commercial contracts handed to me through General's networks. Take it to court, she mimicked. Which courts? It takes a village to give birth to a dictator, and it takes a village to stop one, she said. Why can't you be like your sister? He pointed at me with his lips. Stop this nonsense, he said. Simple. Nicola and I aren't made from the same blood, and we wore water and oil. I had almond-shaped eyes hidden by thick eyelashes and eyebrows. She had large eyes that looked like they were about to pop out of her face. While Patricia liked to cause trouble, I was allergic to it. When we were in secondary school, she escaped from school to go dancing and was suspended for a week. At home, she walked to General's bedroom and brought him one of his belts for her punishment, while I would have dropped on my knees and begged for his forgiveness. In our teens, when she started dating, she would escape through the bedroom windows to hang out with her boyfriends. I wished I could be like her, even as she mocked me for being a coward. At least cowards live a long life, I used to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Ruth. That was lovely. What a beautiful night. Thank you everyone for being here. Also shout out to Theory for putting up with this year with all our anxieties and insecurities. My name is Grace Shuyi Liu. I will be reading a scene from my novel between a straight married couple, Charlie and Mayfun, who love each other in slightly wrong ways. Mayfun is a new mother who has abandoned her family to go on a gambling bender at the casino. So here she returns. Charlie disappears into the bedroom. There's some cash in a sock drawer. He had withdrawn some money from their bank account after Mayfun told him not to bother coming back for her if he was not going to act like the provider he had promised her he would be. She could have chosen the doctor or the neighbor with the orchard. The first time Charlie had even heard of the doctor was during a fight in the meat market, a few months before their first child was born in the early years of their marriage. His wife was explaining to him the difference between spare ribs, cheaper, and back ribs, more expensive, after a heated argument with the butcher who had cheated her of the right cut of meat. I'm sure the soup will taste just as delicious, darling, Charlie consoled his wife, as if you know the difference. Mayfun was insulted. Well, but that's the point, no? What is the difference? Oh, the butcher will love stupid people like you. You just hand your money over and let him give you whatever lousy cut of meat he wants to get rid of, and you will still be grinning like you won the lottery. Meat is meat. Charlie tried to act nonchalant. Even though his wife was right, he could not tell a pork butt from its shoulder. Meat is meat, Mayfun mocked. Your wife here is trying to stretch your wallet and make the most of your money, and if you have nothing helpful to say, just keep your mouth shut. Stretch my wallet? Just buy what you want, darling. Oh, buy what I want? Mayfun asked, incredulous. You think you don't have a baby on the way? Think you're the doctor? What? Nothing, Mayfun said. I was going to marry someone studying to be a doctor. Okay. And I chose you, stupid. After the doctor was introduced to his life, Charlie also began hearing about the neighbor with the fruit orchard. Mayfun's childhood neighbor, Wang, had inherited a mature fruit orchard that bore so much fruit his family basically lived like royalty. Over 50 hectares, and that's just the fruits. He had another few hectares of palm oil cultivated by his poor grandparents who had leased it from the government. By the time the land reached his hands, the government wanted to buy it back to build the country's airport. They paid a high price for it. What luck, right? Can you imagine? Charlie, always asked to imagine other people's fortunes, never said a word to protest this undertaking. He tacitly accepted the challenge his wife put upon him. It was clear she had not given herself fully over to him, despite the nighttime snatches during which she appeared to completely succumb to him in thrashes of pleasure. Charlie loved her the most like that, out of control, in his arms. By daylight, she resumed her proud, ruthless, absent form, which only made him more determined to love his beautiful, ravenous wife to the point of erasing her memories of other men she could have married. She would come to realize her life before him had never mattered and return his love and loyalty with undeniable force and tenacity. He did not know it then, but he would be capable of extreme measures he never imagined possible. Let's go get the kids, Charlie says. The baby needs feeding. Don't look at me. Mayfun makes an X with her arms in front of her chest. Doors closed. Are you serious? Charlie stops in his tracks. What? Doors closed? He can drink formula. Mayfun shrieks. Her husband has such a castrated way of delivering his criticisms that drives her into senseless fury, an emasculated series of indirect stops and starts, innocuous nothing questions whose deeper judgment is always implied, presumed, guessed at, expected, lurking, but never confirmed. His inability to wound her directly makes her despise him. Okay, Charlie says. Just say what you want to say. I said, okay. Mayfun lets the rush that has overcome her entire physical body escape without hesitation. She has swung at her husband before. Well, more like little fits that Charlie found tender in that they were easily subdued. Pitter patter of her wrists, the way of a woman. This time something feels different. Charlie catches the shifted tension in the air and braces. His wife's closed fist comes straight for his nose. Almost amusing, though, how it falls short as its grip again. She is still easily subdued. In fact, so easy is Mayfun that Charlie, after intercepting her rage, does not think twice about taking one step further. And in that instant, after he has grabbed hold of her wrist, he twists his wife's arm right behind her back, spinning her whole body around, and moves to pin her against the wall, chest first. From behind, he pushes his virile, uncastrated manhood against her buttocks. You are easy, he mutters. He is ready to unbuckle and release his inarticulable humiliation into his wife right on that spot, standing up and from behind. Can you believe in all these years of marriage, they've never done it that way before? When she opens her mouth and says with a gasp, finally. Finally what? Our boy is acting like a man now, is he? The sentence flies down his throat and punches down his breath. Charlie goes empty. Mayfun, freed, shakes her head one time decisively, right to left, and smooths down her hair that is still reeking of wet cigarettes from the casino, and repeats, now, where are my children? Thank you so much.
All right, hi everybody. Thanks for coming out. Thank you to the Center for Fiction, and thank you to Terry. New fellows, like nobody works harder than Terry, and we love him. So learn to love Terry. I'm Ian Denning. I'm one of the 2020 fellows. I'm going to read from my novel in progress, Luca. This is a novel about kind of nerd culture and regret and nostalgia and reckoning with the weight of the past. Something you need to know is the narrator is a woman who can like time travel, but only a little bit, like 15, 20 minutes back, sort of like an undo button. And she mostly uses this talent to like obsessively social engineer her entire life. This is from there, near the beginning. I packed only what I needed or couldn't do without. My sketchbooks and laptop, my clothes, my video games. It felt good to be restarting my life with just the necessities, like I was a meteor falling to earth, the atmosphere burning off my excess, leaving only the core, pure Luca. Tom scrambled eggs in the kitchen. Our apartment, a garden-level unit in an ancient brick building full of Boston University students and mice, didn't fare well in the rain. Condensation pearled grayly on the insides of our bedroom windows. Tom brought me eggs and toast without a word, and I closed the door and ate alone, sitting on my luggage. Boston Logan was 45 minutes away through morning rush hour traffic. Tom drove me. A hard rain blurred the city into impressions. Overpasses loomed like colossi, tunnels, the mouths of grottos. I was looking forward to the clean dryness of the airport. I could get warm, play a game on my phone, put my life into sleep mode for a few hours. It's not too late to change your mind, Tom said. I don't really want to have this conversation again, thank you, I replied. He hadn't turned off the windshield wipers when we drove into the I-90 tunnel and they squeaked against the half-dry glass. I resisted the urge to lean over and switch them off. We can turn around. I can sign us up for that couples counselor I emailed you about. Don't you think we should at least try? When I was quiet for too long, he added, this happens to a lot of couples. Oh, it happens? I said. It just happens, like it's random chance? You know what I mean. And then Tom launched into his "You're not treating me very fairly" monologue, which I had heard 3 times in the last month and which I did not care to hear again. Didn't I owe it to him, he wanted to know, to us, Could I really throw 6 years away so easily? Had I considered his feelings? He had written a paper in the first year of his PhD about forms and functions of rhetorical questions, and now he loved to use them when he was arguing with me, something I would not miss. Please shut up, I said, but I said it quietly and he kept talking. And so I let my mind unfocus and rewind. It's not too late to change your mind, Tom said. The wipers shrilled across the windshield. You've already had this conversation. I'm not having it again. We can turn around. I can sign us up for that couples counselor I emailed you about. Don't you think we should at least try? Again, I stayed quiet. Again, he said, this happens to a lot of couples. I leaned my head against the window. This time he didn't start in on the monologue. But what if Tom was right? A lot of couples came back from infidelity. I imagine what it would feel like to ask him to turn around. We'd drive back to Alston. I'd unpack my clothes. We'd pass the day somehow. At night, Tom would sleep in the bed, and I'd stay up into the quiet hours, dungeon crawling and crafting potions in Skyrim, and then crash on the couch. In the morning, he'd make us scrambled eggs and toast. Then what? 14 months in Boston. We'd driven from Seattle with everything we owned in the trunk, from the western terminus of Interstate 90 to the eastern, to an apartment we rented sight unseen in a city neither of us had ever even visited, just so Tom could do his graduate work. To disguise my homesickness, I joked that we were like astronauts exploring an alien world 3,000 miles out at the end of our tether. We would collect soil samples in the commons and track the progress of the stars against the Prudential Tower, and we wouldn't take off our suits until we knew it was safe to breathe. The future unfolded before us. We could go anywhere with the little fission engine of our love. 6 years. 6 years. My anger was fizzling. I wish there was some romance in this. Like, I wish Tom and I were parting like doomed lovers in an anime, piano music swelling and tears sparkling in slow motion instead of just two resentful people stuck in traffic in the Ted Williams tunnel. I decided I would give myself something to remember, a present. Traffic was at a standstill, so I unbuckled my seatbelt and leaned over. I touched Tom's jaw lightly, and when he turned toward me, I kissed him. He was confused, I could tell, and I relished that confusion. He wouldn't remember this. This was just for me, a memory, a sealed chest. I leaned back and rewind. It isn't too late to change your mind, Tom said. I gave him a look that, when he turned so he could see it, drained all expression from his eyes. The car's hood steamed in the closeness of the tunnel. I wondered if I'd ever see him again. I reached over to flip the wipers off and the rubber on glass squeaking stopped. We drove the rest of the way to the airport in silence. Thank you.
How do I sound? I want to thank Thierry and the center and my fellows for being such a light in uncertain times. And I want to congratulate the new fellows. It's going to be a great year. I am Rakina's Far. I'm going to be reading from an excerpt from a novel and stories that I've been working on that's set in the Midwest. The anesthetic influence of suburbia. Nasser had thought, in his own way, that its flatness had induced this zombie state of his, devoid of ethics, of any sense of cause and effect, until his movements were just a necessary sequence of effect after effect. He had become someone who had offloaded the consequences of his actions onto other people, other parties. He knew he was an animal, a scared, shivering thing with any notion of its own mortality tucked away. He had walked the 4 miles from the consignment store near his house, where he converted a portion of his proceeds into store credit as soon as he saw the Navy coveralls falling off the hanger. It had a patch with the name Tyler sewed onto the left breast and was properly soiled. The grime beneath his fingernails and collected in the crevices of his dry hands said that he could be Tyler for a day. The store associate had obliged him reluctantly, anything to get him to leave. The town's main thoroughfare failed to cater to pedestrians, with the sidewalk frequently giving way to decaying grass. He had already hidden a backpack with most of his effects under the bramble behind the elementary school, and into this he compressed his clothes after he changed into the uniform. Pharmacies are edifices, terminals for supply chains that thrum in the background. There was a pair behind the counter when he walked in, an older guy, glasses and eczema, and a neck tattoo that clashed with the corporate logo on his shirt. and a girl with purple hair that couldn't have been a day out of high school, whose attention her coworker was trying to command. Always in need of an insurance policy, Nasser took note of the nicotine gum behind them. He worried that the guy would recognize him, but couldn't find a reason to delay. Rising would look peculiar. The dry friction in his throat as he swallowed, grinding like tectonic plates. I'm Tyler. A smile crept on the girl's face. He could sense her resist the shifty-eyed look at her coworker. Okay. Did he look like a Tyler? What kind of an Arab name could one mutate into Tyler to better not be seen, crouch among the cornfields that constituted much of this place's lifeblood and landmass, wrest control over a birthright that had become a deep stain? There's something wrong with your HVAC. Both behind the counter shot a quick glance up at the ceiling without lifting their heads. Really? The girl extracted a few final notes out of her gum and looked at her coworker. He stepped in front of her. We usually have a guy that comes look at it. I think they send him from corporate. Yeah, I'm assuming that's who sent me. They're outsourcing the job because they need to turn around so many fucking jobs within the area within a limited amount of time. They just released, it's called a new transponder, and it just came off the line and we got to replace it in the area. The last model, it has an error in it. The two employees looked at each other. Their blatant disregard for Nasser's presence was both a response to the nonsense they were hearing and meant to lightly signal to him that he should leave. So Miguel sent you. I don't know, man. They're outsourcing. It's either his fucking boss talks to my boss or my boss talks to his. I don't know. He was gesticulating as if he had any conception of the point that he was trying to make. Listen, I don't know you. You don't know me. That's fine. All I know is that I have an MAOC Model 2 sitting in an unopened box in my truck, and they're not going to be happy with me if I don't bring it back. So if you could just let me in the back, I can take a look and I'll be out of your hair, please. The girl had freckles like he hadn't seen in a while, a band of them across her nose. She shook her head and deposited her spent gum in a tissue, walking towards the photo center while her partner drummed his fingers on the counter. He wanted to call after her and asked to have it, the soft fabric furled around a hard, flavorless pebble. How much he used to be able to charm people, to know them. I'm gonna have to make a call. Okay, Nasser whispered. The words barely escaped. His nose was running. Are you sure? It'll just take a second. Why don't you wait in your car until I give you the okay? Okay, well, do you have a restroom I can maybe use? I don't think so, man. Okay, well, I'm gonna shop some and then I'll go. He felt the clerk's eyes tear into his back as he started examining a few women's hairbrushes near the entrance. Nasser would stay here as long as he needed to, because now he was a customer, his last remaining reserve of power. He snaked around into the next aisle and turned a bag of Halloween candy over in his hand soundlessly, as if judging its heft. He was within the radius of at least one camera near the entrance, but the one closest to the pharmacy pointed away. He walked past rows of dried noodles in plastic bowls of soup and boxes of granola bars, his mouth dry, his body lacking, his head bowed, ambling towards the clerk, ignoring his gaze. He had every right to be here, just like anyone else. But then why did he feel so incongruent with the sense of order enforced in these places of neat commerce, wares stuffed on metal lanes meant to direct one in and around and away, like ocean currents? He looked at the pharmacy again. The woman behind the counter was a hijabi that he recognized from the masjid. He heard the two employees mumble something and step outside. They had forgotten about him. He felt that. And when he saw the bags of dog food stacked on a low shelf, giant, heavy, dominating the aisle, he worked open enough of his space so that he could slide in behind the three of them, lying on his shoulder, hands to his sides, his shoes hidden by chew toys, his nose tucked against crinkling plastic. He tried to keep his body as flat as possible, within this coffin compressed between these overfull pillows on the wall, pausing his breathing for a moment, listening for any sign of alarm. A mechanical chime from the entrance. His sister in the pharmacy continued her pill counting apace. A row of dry, dead flakes crowned his lips, the topography of a white tongue caked in bacteria. A life of expedience that will lead to a single moment, the nebulous flavor of an OC30, taste without referent. He would lay here and hide and dream until he can get him back. Dreams are the evidence of a correspondence between the images that populated his life and something wound within him, something that only unspooled at night. He would sleep and he would dream. He was inexhaustible, and he just needed a few slow minutes before he stood up again. Thank you.
Thank you, fellows. I'm going to ask you guys to do one last thing. If you don't mind standing up and facing the crowd so we can give you a round of applause, that'd be wonderful. Fellows, please stand up. Face the crowd. Before I let you guys go, there are a few more thank yous I'd like to give out. This program is not possible without the help of countless other people. I'd like to thank the editorial mentors who've worked with our fellows this year. Thank you, Katie Adams. Thank you, Patricia Mulcahy. Thank you, Nicole Counts, Judy Sternlight, Meg Story, Mike Levine, Kate Milliken, Ann Horowitz, and Don Raffel. Thanks so much for your work. I'd also like to thank the authors and editors and literary executive agents who have taken the time out of their schedule to speak with our fellows over the last year. And Sadiq, I forgot to have you raise your hand before, but Sadiq, please raise your hand. Thank you, Sadiq Fofana. Thank you, Chantal Johnson. Thank you, Claire Luchette, Julia Phillips, Kaiming Chang. Thank you, the agents, Renee Zuckerberg, Julie Barrere, PJ Mark, and Julia Cardone. Thank you, Jenna Johnson, editor, and thank you, Phil Cohen, literary executive at Time Warner, for having a nice or just an engaging conversation with our fellows about the intersection of film, television, and publishing. I'd also like to thank Vivian Lee, who's been working with our fellows on query letter consultations. Thank you to all our first-tier readers. Without you, this program is not possible. Thank you to all my colleagues here at the center. Each and every one of you plays an important role in this program. Thank you for your help. And I'd like to thank all of you for attending here tonight. This is a special event, a special evening, historic event in the history of this program. Without your support, we wouldn't be here. So you should all give yourselves a round of applause. And finally, to conclude this program, I'd like to invite you all upstairs for a celebratory toast and some conversation. Thank you so much.